Yes, everybody, welcome back to the IrishHotspur here for your weekly Thursday panel show, joined by the Irish contingent here. And there's plenty to dig into, from the nightmare that we had in Madrid to player unrest in the dressing room. Igor Tudor supposedly still in charge and could be taking charge of the Liverpool match, and as well as some other bits and pieces. Plenty to chat about tonight. So please, everybody, if you are a member, give us your questions for the end of the show. Make yourself known if you are watching this back. Thank you to all the listeners to this channel during these difficult times, these difficult conversations. And thanks to Colin and Jack as well for continually making time out of their evenings to try to, as always, make sense of what is a team and a club that we cannot really ever seem to make sense of. It seems like anytime you reach a low with Tottenham Hotspur, they find another low even lower than you thought was possible or imaginable. Good to have these guys back, and we'll get the show underway. Colin, good to have you back with us, sir. We're going to get this going pretty quickly here. When it came to last night, Antonin Kinsky, right? I mean, he did end up being, of course, the source of controversy, but there was actually some pundits as well as some former goalkeepers, Paul Robinson, Peter Schmeichel, Joe Hart, that end up criticizing Igor Tudor's decision to sub Antonin Kinsky after only being on the pitch for 17 minutes. Peter Schmeichel went as far as to say that Tudor has killed his career. Is it Tudor's fault for Kinsky having such a nightmare? Is it Kinsky just having a nightmare and that's just how it is? Was Igor Tudor right to take him off after 17 minutes? We're going to have to, of course, address that absolute nightmare of a situation last night.
Yeah, this is well, first of all, thanks for having me back, and hello to everybody tuning in. Great to be here. Box of tissues standing by, and they have been used well throughout the week. That is a difficult one. I think there's many elements to it. I think Tudor's purpose in putting Kinsky in was to put pressure on Vicario, because whilst Vicario has been a problem for us, he certainly hasn't been our biggest problem, but it is a specialized position. And I'm not really sure what other game he could have put him in. If you're just approaching it from the logic of the point of view, let's get him between the sticks and see how he reacts. So from that perspective, I kind of get the logic. In the cold light of day, retrospectively, obviously a terrible decision. Also, I think it's catastrophic because he makes, well, and they all slipped at one point or another. So he obviously doesn't help himself by having a terrible couple of moments, which, one on its own, you think he can go on and recover. But those two and then three, you're just thinking this is... So I actually think Tudor did the right thing in taking him off, even though from the other perspective, you might say how highly embarrassing it is, but it could have been a lot worse. Yeah. And, I mean, I know Tudor's going to catch strays for putting him in the first place, but when do you put him in? I mean, yeah, if you were going to put him in, this was the one to do it in. A kind of a nothing match, and it's typical Spurs. Kind of a nothing match turns into a bloody hell, it's an everything match, because it just goes from bad to worse and worse again. So don't necessarily agree or disagree with the decision to put Kinsky in. I understand the logic behind it. Retrospectively, a terrible decision. I do agree with taking him off. I know the optics weren't great, but young man, if it was only going to get worse, get him out of harm's way. So I think history will show it was a merciful decision in a way. But certainly that's my perspective on it. And then to the whole controversy about not acknowledging him or whatever else, I just, Tudor's concentrated on the match. It's not as if he tried to purposefully ignore him. We're 3-0 down. He has to do something. He's focused on what to do. I think that's, again, a bit like Thomas Frank in the Arsenal Cup. It's a bit of something and nothing, in my opinion. But yeah, a strange one and a strange event, and it's only Spurs that could manage it.
No, a good answer from you, because actually there are a few things on that. It seems like we often say, oh, these players are too coddled, type of thing. And then at the same time, we're like, why didn't Tudor go and, calm Kinsky down, walk into the tunnel with him? It's like, well, at the same time, we're saying that these players are far too sensitive and, are far too coddled. So like Tudor should be out there still coaching the players. Forget what Kinsky is going through. But then also, like what you say there, before the game, Dave and I always get a vibe or a tone of the fan base before balls actually kicked. A lot of people are going into that game like saying things like, "Oh, we should rotate the squad. This is unfortunately a match that's not as important as the Premier League ones at the minute. We're just going to have to forego the Champions League." And then things like that can happen. Then, you end up changing a goalkeeper, you end up changing maybe position here or there. And then all of a sudden, after the fallout, everyone's like, why would he ever put Kinsky in? Before the game, everyone was asking for rotation. And also, plenty of people for months now, with how poor of a season Vicario has been having, have asked for Kinsky to come in.
Get him in.
No game's ideal. I don't think you can drop like the perfect game for him. Thomas Frank did his best job to knock us out of all the domestic cup competitions as quickly as possible. Those would have been the games that Kinsky probably would have been thrown into anyways. So no game's an easy game to be thrown into, and that was the one for Kinsky. And I just think, unfortunately, he blew it. Yeah, it's just how.
Well, I think the pitch blew it as well as. Yeah, I always felt he's a little bit arrogant, Kinsky, and he's likely to try, but like not concentrating on connecting with the ball correctly for that one he tried to pass across his body in an area where he knew he'd already slipped. And there was other players that already slipped. I don't understand why he tried to do something like get control of the ball and then move the ball on, particularly if you're under pressure. So he is to blame a small bit. It's not all on the pitch. It's not all on Tudor. It's certainly it's all round.
Yeah. And to you, Jack, I mean, there was a lot of criticism for Igor Tudor for selecting him in the first place and for taking him off after 17 minutes. Where do you lay the blame at? Who are you more frustrated with, Igor Tudor or just Kinsky, I guess, having such a nightmare?
I'd kind of go the same route as Colin. I thought he made some good points that it was the sort of game that you want to give him a go. And the reality is we're not on the training pitch every day of the week. Maybe he did look great in training and that was just like, sometimes things just happen in games, but that's going to probably follow him for the rest of his career now. And I don't know if he ever comes back the same goalkeeper. I know you saw with Karius was the famous one that's getting compared to it. Like, he just never really recovered from that. And I've played in goals a bit myself, and it's when you make a mistake, it's the loneliest place in the world because there's nothing you can do to make up for it. And like, you've kind of 10 outfield players and a goalkeeper. Like, when you make mistakes, a goalkeeper is very different to doing as an outfielder. And anytime then the ball comes near you, you're panicking, thinking, I can't make another mistake. And I think ultimately the second mistake doesn't happen if the first one doesn't happen first. I think he was just so in his head and probably still thinking about the first mistake that he just wasn't even focusing on the game, which it's fairly unforgivable. And the reality is, if you want to be a top professional, you can't have that mentality. You have to be able to brush things off. It's the same as like, we saw plenty of times where Harry Kane had missed a chance and then another one come his way 5 minutes later and he'd bury it. Like, he didn't let the first miss get him down, whereas you see guys like Timo Werner that are one-on-one with the keeper and they're really panicking, thinking that they're going to miss. And I think that's the sort of mentality difference, and that's kind of amplified them with goalkeepers as well, because it looks comedic then when they make a mistake as opposed to a striker missing a chance. They could still get another chance later on in the game, and you only talk about the goal that they scored, whereas with goalkeepers, if you make a mistake and then make a great save, people only talk about the mistake really. So it's kind of the inverse of it. But I think it was one of those, it was a free hit of a game, but maybe if it was something where he wasn't doing well at training and Tudor's just gone, Asher will just throw him in to give him a go, then you maybe lay a bit of blame at Tudor. But we don't have that kind of behind the scenes access to that, so it's kind of hard to draw conclusions. But I think kind of Kinsky's just a case study for everything that's wrong with the club. We bought him last season in a panic, came in his debut, looked brilliant, looked confident, assured, gradually chipped away at him. Then Vicario came back. Kinsky played, I think, 2 games the rest of the season after Vicario came back. Was it Doncaster he played in the Cup? Had then 2 mistakes against Newcastle. Didn't play again until this week. And like, just expecting players to develop while sitting on the bench is just bizarre. Like, you're not going to get better as a player by sitting on the bench, especially not as a goalkeeper. You need to be kind of getting those repetitions in, just getting out there and getting playing. And he's one of those guys that just, we should have loaned him out, gotten a sort of a homegrown senior goalkeeper. I know we've been linked to someone like Sam Johnson in the past. Sam Johnson's not a great keeper, but he wouldn't have made those 2 mistakes the other night. And you could have Kinsky possibly coming back in the summer if things were handled differently and saying, maybe this guy's potentially there to challenge whoever our goalkeeper may be. But instead, now we're talking of basically his Tottenham career's over. His football career at the top level might well be over. I don't know what he's going to be like mentally after that, but it'll probably take him a long time to recover from. And I think a lot of top teams will probably be put off buying him as a result of that, because how public it was.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, is there anything? Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, I get the comparison to I'm going to pronounce his name terribly, the Liverpool keeper, Karius, but it's not the same, in my opinion. Yes, it's the same stage, in Europe, but, Kinsky hasn't, his error has led to a goal. He hasn't actually fumbled it into the back of his own net. But I get the comparison. I just don't think it's quite on the same level. I think Kinsky has a good chance of coming back and recovering, because it's not all on him. It's on, the footwear, it's on the pitch, it's on the slip, it's on whatever else. Whereas Karius basically just planted one in his own net.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry.
In fairness, the Barcelona keeper I saw when they lost 4-0 to Atletico, the ball fell under his foot. Like, there's obviously something up with that pitch.
Big time.
Like, I think there's been a fair few complaints about it, but still, we're a football club supposedly worth 3 or 4 billion. You'd think that they would have looked into that before the game and said, lads, make sure you wear longer studs and be careful with your footing. But instead, it was like as if they went in there blind and had no idea. And I think that's just the sort of complacency that's really snuck into the club. I don't think Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal make that mistake. I think they address that before the game and it doesn't become really an issue.
Maybe to be petty, I feel like if you had left Kinsky on 10 more minutes, he probably would have bumbled it into his own net, if not shot it into it. Not really
if he makes 3 mistakes and then you take him off, I just felt sorry for him going off. If it was a league game, I'd be like, I'd be livid at the fella, but a cup game, I just felt sorry for him.
Yeah. Dave, I mean, any new revelations about the Kinsky situation? Truth set you free, saying the manager must take the blame. He picked him, and Kinsky let him and Spurs down big time. It was the loudest I'd ever screamed when probably those mistakes were happening. Any new revelations since last time we spoke?
Yeah, well, I said as soon as I seen the change, I remember saying in the watch along before the game, I said, it's a huge risk tonight, because if the kid fails spectacularly, we don't have a goalkeeper that the manager trusts that we believe that can keep us up or make big saves to keep us up. And it makes you, it sort of leaves you in even more despair as a Spurs fan moving forward. But look, when it comes to the whole Kinsky situation, I don't blame Igor Tudor. It's a shambles right now. And at the end of the day, we're on borrowed time. You can't just keep putting players out there if they're making mistakes. You have to try things. And I don't mind a manager trying things. But timing is so important in football. And I think that's where he let himself down. I think Crystal Palace at home, in front of your own crowd, in a home game in the Premier League, I think would be the right place to try him. Because if he did make a mistake, I do think a lot of Spurs fans, have we seen, we can sit here and say, Spurs fans right now wouldn't. Many Spurs fans hated Davinson Sanchez, but as soon as he got booed, people sort of got on his side and stuff like that. But I think if the fans seen him make that mistake in our stadium, they might have got behind him, and you might not have seen it, another error compiled with another error. And I think, timing is everything. And I think Tudor got the timing on it wrong. But with Kinsky, I think he's only got himself to blame at the end of the day. I know this comes across and may sound harsh, but it's elite level sport we're talking about. There's only so many opportunities you're going to get to showcase your talents. He had an opportunity last season, failed to take it. He had an opportunity this season, failed to take it. And we could say, but that's a bit harsh. It's a high pressure environment. These people are paid to perform in higher pressure environments, so there's no excuse there. I also don't give him the excuse of the pitch either, to be brutally honest with you. There's video evidence that if Kinsky really cared about this going right, or people in the goalkeeping department really cared about this going right, they would have had video evidence of what Jack was talking about, goalkeepers having problem on that pitch with balls in and around their feet. So automatically he should have been going into that game known not to take the risk, not to play around in that area. And then especially off the first mistake, to Colin's point, you don't do it again after that. You just pump the ball along, set yourself into the game, calm your nerves down a little bit. He failed to do that. He went to do it again. You know, and he got caught. And again, it's a technical error. Kick that with your left, not your right. Why are you trying to kick across your body on an already slippy surface when you've already slipped once? So I think he's only got himself to blame. And at the end of the day, he would have been sitting there waiting for his opportunity, probably knocking on the manager's door, asking the goalkeeping coach, when am I going to get an opportunity to play? However, I think anyone that was asking for Kinsky wasn't reading news in around October, November, when reports came out from Sky Sports and other sources telling us Kinsky had regressed behind the scenes. And I'm not being funny, but like, you know, he can sit there and he can blame the ownership or anyone else he wants. He's come from the Czech Republic into an elite sporting environment in terms of everything in the training complex for him to be able to improve himself while he's here. If he doesn't have the dedication and doesn't avail of everything that's there for him to be able to improve himself, again, that's on him. He has to take responsibility on that. And it comes back to the whole Roy Keane thing, saying, you know, prepare to fail, fail to prepare. Or was it fail to prepare to fail? And that's exactly what happened with Kinsky there. He didn't prepare properly. You know, they warmed up on the football pitch. Surely he would have known going in there, it's a bit slippy out there. Don't take, you know, touches with the ball at my feet and stuff like that. Don't take risks. And also, you know, being out there warming up, how has he not picked the right pair of studs to come out onto the pitch with? So that doesn't happen. They say when it's slippy and greasy, wear longer studs so you get better grip, you know. Now, I know a lot of modern players sort of wear a bit of a hybrid, studs and molds and stuff like that. But footwear, again, right, these are all just small preparations that we miss. But look, that's sort of, to Jack's point, that's on a larger scale at this football club. No one prepares properly for these games of football. They just think bring in the players, send them out there, and hopefully to get the job done. No one really cares about everything else that comes with winning, all these small, minor details. These are all things that, you know, Kinsky can blame the department for not giving them if they didn't. But these are things that he should also be looking into if he wants to improve himself and he wants to reach the top level. These are all things you have to do in your spare time. You sacrifice your time for these small gains. That's what makes the greats great. And, you know, it's clear that he didn't do that. But one thing he did have prepared was his hair walking out on the pitch. I said it before he even walked out. I said, I'm alarmed. He looks like Laurie Carius. You know, I reckon he's going to have a bad evening. Look at the hairstyle. You know, that's the one thing that was prepared, though, walking out onto the pitch. Sums up a lot of what's going on at Tottenham Hotspur. Every single one of their hairs are perfect, but yet on the football pitch, they're making mistakes left, right, and centre. I'm absolutely sick of it. So I think Kinsky has no one to blame but himself at the end of the day. But larger thing is, Enoch should also take a large bearing of the responsibility. They brought him in a panic last year. It backfired. Why is he still here? Why is he still here as our number 2, knowing that if you do get an injury to Vicario, you have to rely on him? He shouldn't be here. They should have took their answer last year and done it very quickly, got him out in the summer and brought in the next guy. Even so, reports came out before January transfer window saying he was regressing. He's still here to be number 2. Why? You know? Why? In fact, what we could have done is actually sent him to West Ham. He might have actually helped us stay in the league that way.
I don't mean to laugh, but very well put.
Just winds me up. I just think there's so many excuses for, you know, some of these players and lack of performances and stuff like that. And, you know, I just think at the end of the day, it's on you to make sure you're prepared. You can sit there and say, oh, they didn't provide me this or this wasn't given to me. But it's on you at the end of the day. It's for you to look after your own career. You can't keep blaming everybody else. And as for this hugging shit, I'm sorry. I don't like... I emphasize with him on a human level, you know, like to Jack's point, you know, he's got to be so low. He's probably sitting there, you know, down on himself, thinking about it. And he's probably in a lonely place thinking the whole world is against him. Everyone's talking about it. Go online, everyone's mocking him. It's a lonely place to be. But only he can dictate how he bounces back from this. Everyone else can sit there and give him encouragement, advice and stuff like that. But it's up to him whether he has the grit and determination to go, right, you know what? I've learned a lesson here. I've learned that I didn't prepare properly. I let it slip a little bit. That's all on me. How do you bounce back? Let's see if he's any accountability in himself.
When was the last time you got a hug from your manager, Dave or Jack, when you make a cock up? I can assure you, I don't get one from mine.
No, you didn't. You got absolutely lambasted, if not dropped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's savaged. But it is a bit of a common theme, though, isn't it, about these players not being really mature enough in order to stand up and be counted. And well, men of a certain, or people, or I shouldn't say men, that's very sexist. People, men and women of a certain age, and by I mean me as an elder lemon. I mean, you do see a lot of kids coming through who just have huge expectation and no desire to work hard for it or take responsibility for the outcomes. You know, it's almost like a subscription service. I'm going to subscribe to this job for a period of time. If it doesn't work, I'll just move on to something else. And they'll never actually look inwardly to say, well, actually, that didn't work out because I cocked up. They'll just blame everything else. And there's quite a bit of that in the youth coming through, unfortunately. And our players, multimillionaires though they are no different.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, we'll keep it moving. I think Jack is preoccupied with some dogs there at the minute.
It looks like it.
Sorry, Dave. Just before you move on, just about the Palace game, I do kind of disagree with you on that. Just like if you put him in for the Palace game and he makes those 2 mistakes, you're saying he's costed us potentially 3 points in a massive relegation fight game. Basically, I think the Atletico game was more of a free hit where if something like that happens, you go, oh, well, we were probably going to go out anyway, and it didn't really matter. Whereas the Palace game, I wouldn't have felt as sorry for him because I would have been feeling sorry for myself more. So I think that game was too important to put him in.
I do get what you're saying. And look, it's sort of, you know, we had this debate in the pre-match build-up to the Atletico game. What's more important right now, prioritizing Premier League or Champions League? And I do understand what you're saying. I just think if I'm a manager and I'm going to give a guy an opportunity and I know that there is a potential that this could backfire or else it could really work out and that it's 50-50, I'm picking the environment where I can give him the best opportunity to shine, you know, and that if something does go wrong, that he's in the right environment where he's in his own sort of circle with, if you like, and, you know, that there's a lot of people to be able to pick him up. I wouldn't throw him in a bigger European away game where it's notoriously, you know, been difficult for a lot of opposing teams to go, and that if he makes a mistake in the first couple of minutes, that there's potential it could get worse and completely be embarrassed. You know, I think we were 4 down within 20 minutes. Of course, not all his fault, but it all started with him at the end of the day. And I just don't think Tudor gave him the right environment to really sort of showcase himself, if you would like, because a lot of professional players all get nervous going to Atletico. Everyone knows how difficult it is to go, let alone a guy that's been out of, not played for so long, has been a number 2. Confidence is already sort of a little bit shaky. There's already been reports that, you know, he had regressed behind the scenes earlier on in the season. For me, it's just about, you know, environment and timing. And that's where I'm at.
Number 2
I do get what you're saying. But look, we'll keep it moving. We'll come back to these Ange Postecoglou quotes from TNT. I'll let we'll go with them actually. That's next. So this is a question from Jack. Ange said in a TNT interview after the Atletico game, I think what's really important is that objectively no one can argue that these players are performing at the levels they're capable of. You need to somehow ease the pressure off of them. Even last night, I thought it was an excellent opportunity for them. The amount of times they were slipping over must be the pressure they are feeling and desperation in everything you do. Mentally, when you're a player under pressure, you rush things, you lunge into things. Mentally, it's about instilling some belief into them and show them the players that they are, and not what they can be, but that they are and have already shown. Now, we'll start with you on this one, Colin. I mean, plenty of people have argued that the players are showing their true colours this season, that they are, in fact, this bad. Is Ange right to maybe argue that they are, in fact, much better players than they're actually showing right now?
I think he has an agenda in saying that, because he you know, obviously had a European Cup winning squad. Part of it, or most of it, is part of his team. So I suppose he'd have the belief that they can do better. I'm never going to knock winning a cup, but we know we didn't play particularly well. And we probably rode our luck and whatever else. So I do think that squad overachieved, and that the real form was in the league both last year and this year. It doesn't surprise me he'd say something like that, because that was his kind of modus operandi as a manager. It's all on me. It's nothing to do with the players. And I think he liked to give people the scope and the space in order to do their job effectively without any outside noise. So it doesn't surprise me he'd say something like that, because that's exactly what he'd do if he went in there. He would say, you know, if somebody crosses the ball, that's because I told them to. If somebody runs down the wing, that's because I told them to. You know, And he liked to do that and create that environment so that they were a little bit cocooned from all the negativity, which is probably something that, Thomas Frank certainly didn't do. So they're feeling the full brunt of it now. But, I don't agree fully with what he said. Maybe you'll get a little bit more out of them if they were cocooned, because they seem to be a bunch of precious individuals. But at the end of the day, it's on them to perform. And the league doesn't lie. I believe in that sentence. It didn't lie last year, and it's not lying this year. So, it's I don't know how just coming in and shielding them from some bad negative press is going to get an extra effort out of them or whatever. I mean, how did they not realize they're already in a terrible, terrible situation? So I can see why he'd say it. I don't necessarily believe it. I don't even think if he started tomorrow and started to do it, it would make any difference.
No, that's absolutely fair. Jack, over to you, my man. Is he right to point out that the reason behind these poor performances has to do with the pressure that they're under and that it is sort of getting to them? Is that a valid excuse, or is it more of an explanation?
I think Ange is probably the best person to speak on it. He knows those players better than probably anyone, really, having worked with them for 2 full years compared to Frank, who was there for 6 months or whatever, and now Tudor, who's there 3 or 4 weeks and is saying everything he knows, is everything he notices and everything's wrong with the club. But Ange he knows those guys inside out, and I think some of them. I think Colin's kind of right with some of the guys that maybe they aren't at that level. I think, especially some of those midfielders, I think they're absolutely terrible, and I can't get over how poor some of them are. But like guys like Romero and Van de Ven, they're far better than the level they're showing at the moment. I think Romero, I don't think has been as bad as people have made out. It's just the red cards are obviously they're a killer, and they're a really bad look for him that he's constantly getting the red cards. Whereas Van de Ven has gone from probably being our player of the season about 6 weeks ago to like, I can't stand the fella anymore. I think his attitude is absolutely appalling. And I thought how he wasn't sent off on Tuesday night is absolutely beyond me. That was a horrible challenge he put in on, I don't even remember what the Atletico player it was.
He slipped, lad. The pitch was a disgrace. He slipped.
No excuse, Dave. No excuse. You should have known.
Listen, it was dangerous. It was reckless, and it was he's playing like a guy who's desperate. I don't know if it's that he doesn't care. I think it's just like, I think when things are going bad, players just panic sometimes. You either panic, it's kind of fight or flight, and I think some of them are flying rather than knowing how to fight. It's not really through poor attitude. I just think it's through some sort of maybe weak mentality, I guess you'd say. But yeah, I think yes, some of them are underperforming. Some of them maybe are performing at the level that you kind of expected them. Someone like maybe Jed Spence, who had a good run for maybe 6 months under Ange and I guess he was okay defensively under Frank. He's been absolutely terrible recently. Like he strikes me as the sort of guy who thinks he's a lot better than what he is. Van de Ven's quite similar to that as well. Vicario has his obvious faults. Colan, I'm not even going to talk about Colan Wani. I can't stand that. Apart from maybe in Ndombele, who was at least a bit talented, I've not seen a player put in less effort playing for Tottenham than what he has. But like, I still think there's good players in there. Romero, Van de Ven are both very good players. Romero's, I think, comfortably still our best player, even with the red card. Solanke is a fairly decent Premier League striker. Richarlison knows how to get in the end of things and put the ball in the back of the net. Porro, I thought, looked some way back to his best actually the other night, which I think went under the radar. He got a goal and assisted our second goal and put in for the Richarlison header. He put a brilliant cross in. So I think players like that, I think, they are capable of playing to a much higher level than what they've shown this season. And I think whether some of it's down to mentality, some of it's down to poor squad building, I think there's a lot that's gone into it really. But we're in a position now where they just have to fight and get out of it. And if they show that fight, I've no doubt they are good enough to get out of it. But it's just whether they have it in them and they can get that sort of confidence back. I think a lot of it's just down to belief, and the longer we go without winning a game, the harder it becomes. But I think if we can just get one win under our belts, I think we can probably turn that into a few wins on the bounce, sort of similarly to what we did last year in we didn't win a game, I think, for 2.5 months then. And then we beat Brentford, and then I think we beat United and Ipswich back to back. And then that kind of opened up a lovely little gap from the relegation zone, which meant we were never really in danger. So I could see something like that happening again. But I think the players do have to be stronger. And I do kind of agree with Ange that they're better than what they're shown. But at the same time, it's not really a valid excuse. And games aren't won on paper, they're won on the pitch. And there's a lot more that goes into it than what you're capable of doing.
Yeah.
And forgive my departure, Dave, but maybe you want to take the last one here. Is he right to point out that maybe all they need is just an arm around them and just to be reminded and shown that they are, in fact, good players in his eyes? He said that they just need to be shown what they've done in the past to remind them that they are, in fact, good players. I mean, is he right to take that approach, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just Ange that's saying that. I think a lot of the media is saying it. I think Harry Redknapp's been sort of very vocal in sort of saying that as well, that that's what this squad needs. And I think a lot of people were saying that's what this squad needed, you know, once they got rid of Thomas Frank to a certain degree. To be honest with you, when you look at the amount of pundits, you know, in the last couple of weeks, for instance, you've had Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville, Simon Jordan, Alan Shearer, Rio Ferdinand, Jamie Carragher, all players that, you know, all people that have been in and around the game, in dressing rooms. Jamie O'Hara is another one. They're all saying that this team doesn't have the fight. They don't have the stomach for it. You know, when all these people are saying it, that's alarming to me. But, you know, but us Spurs fans have seen this for quite some time. We've questioned it for quite some time. It's like we are in massive danger of going down. And when on top of all these extra reports that have come out today, you know, in terms of splits in the camp and players not caring and stuff, I mean, we can see that. And if you don't have a team that's together, then you have absolutely no hope of coming out. It really actually doesn't matter who you put in charge in a dugout, to be brutally honest with you, because he's set up for failure. Because right now we've got about a squad of 15, maybe 15 fit players to choose from. If half of them aren't pulling their weight and you still have to put them out on the football pitch to form a team, then what hope have you got? They're going to cost you games. You know, you don't have everyone in there fighting for the one cause. And this is where I get annoyed with this group of players. You know, I get it, right? They don't like the fans. They've made that clear. They've offered fans out for fight. They don't like the ownership. They've made that clear. And they don't like the managers. They've made that clear. When they're actually going to start looking at themselves, they blame everyone else. You know, they blame the ownership. They blame the managers. They blame the fans. I don't see them blaming themselves, though, at any point, which is a huge concern for me, which shows I don't think there's any real recognition or any real care. I think a lot of them are just preserving their sort of reputation, you know, amongst what's going on right now and detaching themselves from being a big part of the problem. But at the end of the day, they're the only ones that can sort this out. And you look, who's really going to, like, sort of pull that dressing room together? Who's really going to sort of bring everybody together? We don't have that guy. Your Kane is gone. Your son is gone. All them guys are gone. You know, people can sit there and look at Christian Romero. I think, you know, judging when he came out with that statement, sort of berating the board, I think that was him tapping out to a certain degree. He's fed up here. And, you know, you hear reports then coming out today that some players don't care because they know they're going to be moving on in the summer and stuff like that. It's concerning. It really doesn't matter what manager you bring in right now. Unless you have a squad that is together fighting for the one cause, you're fucked. And then whenever you're the pundit is seeing that and everyone's saying the same thing, you're screwed. You know, and what annoys me is you don't need to like every individual. Usually you put it into any life scenario. Family. I'm sure there's people out there that don't like some people in their own family. You go into any job in the world, there's people like, you know, that don't like each other, but they have to get on with it for the sake of the job. And it's the same in dressing rooms and teams. You know, even if you go to your local five-a-side or you played on teams growing up, you didn't like anyone in the dressing room. You might not have even liked the manager, but you got to overlook that, find a common goal that you can all get behind and work towards it. But they're incapable of doing that. They've already checked out. They're mentally checked out, you know, and I think we're absolutely doomed. And that's what's scary. It really doesn't matter what manager you bring in next. However, I would still keep rolling the dice rather than just accepting my fate.
And maybe on just sort of the players not being together and not fighting for that one cause, let's go on to this. Jay Harris of The Athletic, Jack, said that some members of the Spurs squad are determined to try to stop this team's decline, but they have expressed displeasure at the application of some of their teammates who they believe are not motivated to help the cause. He also reported that one Spurs player has expressed to his teammates that he is not too concerned by the possibility of relegation because he believes he can and will be able to leave the club this summer. Do you believe this reporting from Jay Harris at the Athletic that there are, in fact, fractures within the camp because some seem to care less than others?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think one such example I saw of it on the pitch was last Thursday against Palace that Colin Wani gave away a stupid free kick for just a lazy challenge. I think just before that, it was for the Palace disallowed goal at 0-0. And Van de Ven sprinted 50 yards forward to berate him and say that was absolutely disgraceful. That was just a lack of work rate, really. And I think he is one of those guys that's clearly not trying. And I know Van de Ven, we can be critical of him, but the fact that he got that irritated at him on the pitch shows that maybe he does care a bit more. Whereas if he didn't really care, he wouldn't have really bothered himself because he'd probably be in the same boat as Colin Wani. But I think he gets the same out of guys like Basuma as well. He knows he's off in the summer. But yeah, I think it's never going to be good in camp when you're 16th in the league, when you probably thought you were going to be fighting for top 4, top 5 and aiming to go on a European run. There's obviously stuff with the fans, stuff with the owners and stuff. It's never going to be a healthy environment when a team's doing worse than what they should be. Sometimes one causes the other and then they just exasperate each other constantly and just keeps making the situation worse, which is really probably what has happened here. I think it's quite clear they all don't really like this new manager. As much as we blame the players, he doesn't really seem like the sort of fella you would get behind. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of different fractures kind of coming from different areas, and I definitely would believe it now. I know he said there was one specific player that had talked about not caring because they're leaving in the summer. You don't know if that's a Romero or a Van de Ven or whether that's a Dragusin or something like that. That could be yeah, well, I think the way it was phrased was as if it wasn't a lone player, it was someone that was permanently contracted. If it was any other way, I would have just assumed it was Moani. I think it said that they think they'll be able to get out of the club in the summer.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would be Moani. He would have been the first one I would have gone to. And Basuma's on a free transfer, I think, anyway. So he wouldn't fall into that. But could well be someone like Dragusin. He thinks he's probably going to Real Madrid in the summer when we get relegated.
from Wimbledon in tennis, the fucker.
He's one of the worst players I've ever seen play for Tottenham. But I don't know. It's sure not to be a good atmosphere around the place. I think that's just natural when a team's underachieving. I don't think that's any sort of revelation. I just think that's what comes out when you're underperforming as a team. That some players will probably have criticisms of each other. You saw in the Amazon documentary, Danny Rose threw a few of his teammates under the bus, saying that they're all rubbish every week and they still play and I don't. And so that's probably the sort of stuff that's going on, that you have guys coming in and saying, oh, well, he's not pulling his weight, so it's not really my fault and stuff like that. So I just think that's just the sort of environment you create when you're underachieving. That doesn't happen when you're flying high, because everyone's happy then in that situation. So I just think it naturally comes in. You probably find 3 wins on the bounce and suddenly a lot of these problems at the training ground between players go away and they're back to being pals again. So it's all very short term, and ultimately if you can turn the tide, nothing fixes problems like winning football matches, as the old saying goes. So I think it's just a byproduct of how poorly we're doing, and it's probably also making the situation worse.
And don't forget, it's like the old saying, a paper never refuses ink. And we're topical because we're obviously one of the founding members of the Premier League, not relegated since 1977. Aspirations to be a big club, a bit of a banter club for most of the media in the UK. So any little rumor, it's going to be turned into an article to drive clicks, to drive coverage, to drive everything else. So, you have to dismiss 99% of it. But we are in a desperate situation. So therefore, there's just going to be a lot of focus, and therefore there will be more stories. If this type of thing happened at Manchester United, where 2 people fell out over a bar of soap or something, it doesn't make the headlines. It does with us because we're in jeopardy.
Yeah, I sometimes feel that way about, maybe it's just tinfoil hat from me, but often with these journalists, in particular around Spurs or just around sometimes sports in general, in that they'll just sort of put two and two together. They kind of seem to just connect the dots, and then they connect the dots by validating it through some sort of random source or something like that that they claim has come out to them and told them that. But it's almost like they're usually just reporting on things that we as fans have seen weeks ago, if not months ago. Like, it's not really rocket science to point out that some of these players are probably headed out the door this summer and might not really care all that much actually about the outcome of relegation, knowing that they are going to be gone. But then also we have noticed just with our eyes that some players do seem to be showing a bit more fight than others. Archie Gray has been a key example of that. You would think of some others as well that seem to really care, and it seems to really affect them, the position that we find themselves in, losing game in, game out, and also maybe what even Jack has brought up there with one player making a mistake and then one player as well showing their frustration and venting towards that. Sometimes I just wonder if the journalists just have this guise or this cloak of, pointing out the things that we all are as fans seeing, and then they just back it up by making up some source that they've, supposedly heard it from. When they've gotten so many transfer rumors wrong in the past, most of these guys around Spurs, sometimes I question whether there really is any sort of inside source they have.
Well, I think if it was the transfer window, and it was about linking players elsewhere, I'd say, look, load of baloney. But when it's specific things like that, and I think when you look on the football pitch, you can see it yourself. Yeah, you can see there's players out there that aren't trying to you compare us to the likes of West Ham, who were 7 points behind us at one stage. Every single one of their players are sprinting around the pitch. Every single one of them are fighting for each other. They're playing as a team. They're playing as a unit. You look at us. We look like 11 individuals on the pitch. Everyone playing for different reasons. You also look at some of our best players that you would hope would turn up to keep us up. What's their incentive? If they want to get out of this football club, and Romero's on a long-term contract just recently signed, Van de Ven still has a couple of years left on his. If you want out of this club, it's easier for you to get out if this club was relegated, because they're not going to carry your wages down. Even at 50%, they're not going to carry that down. They're not going to be able to bat off the interest. And there's a good risk that these players don't turn up for preseason, like Isak, and end up forcing their move through anyway. It creates one big saga. So the club ain't going to carry that, And if we end up staying up, they're just going to tell Romero, you're not going anywhere. They're going to tell Van de Ven, you're not going anywhere, because there are better players, and they're going to look to build off that to try and propel us back up the league. So, I would say I do think there is credence to these reports. I truly do believe when you look on the football pitch, is every single one of them players, mistakes happen, right? Everyone makes mistakes. But when you look at them players on the pitch, can you honestly sit here with your hand on your heart and say every single one of them are dying for the cause? Every single one of them are putting 100% maximum effort. And if you don't see that on the football pitch, you can only imagine, are they really doing that behind the scenes in training every single day? How motivated are they? Because if they were, I could tell you, after being humbled off the back of a North London derby, they would have turned up against Fulham. Off the back of being humbled in a second London derby, they would have turned up against Crystal Palace. After being humbled off the back of 3 London derbies on the bounce, okay, boys, Europe, it's our bread and butter. It's where we've shone. Let's go and perform. I'm fucking absolutely humiliated. So I would absolutely say there's credence to a lot of them, to them sort of reports right now.
Sorry, I got muted. By the way, everybody, we have over 350 people in the house across all platforms. So if you are over on X, feel free to follow us over here to YouTube. Join the people in the chat. Have conversations with us. Thanks to all the listeners as well. And do smash the like button, please. Just sends us out to more and more Spurs fans. Unless we had anything else to say on that athletic interview, we still have Igor Tudor to talk about. Go to you on this one, Colin. Is it time to sack Igor Tudor right now, right this time? He's lost all 4 of his matches. Doesn't seem like the squad has really come together. In fact, they seem to be more alienated than ever. What do you make of the fact that Igor Tudor hasn't been sacked yet? And do you think he needs to go?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was really, really, really reluctant, as regular viewers and listeners would know, because I did want Thomas Frank to succeed, or sorry, not necessarily Thomas Frank, but I wanted stability in the club, and I wanted somebody who could just kind of stop the madness. And in the end, we have even more madness. So I was prepared, probably a bit like the board was, to hope that we would turn a corner. And in the end, it was probably a little bit too late. It was the right decision to get rid of Frank. Bringing in Tudor, didn't know anything about him, but when you did your research, you saw, oh, look, he's able to turn clubs around and get results in a short space of time. It's not happening here. It's clearly not. Since Ange has been there, Thomas Frank has come in and tried to improve this club and failed. Tudor has come in, albeit for a much, much smaller period of time, and failed. We absolutely need to roll the dice again, just to steal your phrase, Dave. Because when I was articulating how I felt about Thomas Frank and should he stay or should he go, there was more time. There was more time for the oil tanker, as they kept using boat references, to turn. There's no time now. The only time we have is right now, and it's absolutely imperative, in my opinion. I'm surprised he's still there. We should absolutely. There is just simply no sign. And I know in some other podcasts they were saying, well, at least towards the end of the game, it was a little bit better. And actually, we didn't play that badly. And, the slips and mistakes aside, it might have been only a 1-0 loss or a 2-1 or whatever. But that's still the same level as we've been at, which is terrible. Just terrible. Just putting in enough to kind of put in a half-decent performance, but ultimately getting beaten every single time. And we're collecting unwanted records left, right, and centre. If we wanted him to come in and make an immediate impact, the Arsenal game aside, I know there's no such thing as a free pass, but you would kind of give him that as a free pass. First game in the door, one of the best teams in Europe at the moment. But it hasn't happened. So I think, you pull the trigger. You absolutely pull the trigger. And it doesn't really... Well, not that it doesn't really matter who comes in, but Jesus Christ, get somebody in who might have the right formula to get something out of these players. Give them 3 games. If that's not right, pull the trigger. Again, just keep rolling the dice until you get out of it. At least that way you can put your head on the pillow at night and say, I did everything I could. Because this board have done nothing to help us. And I stand by my -11 for the January transfer window. It was just astonishing. I just cannot believe the position what we're in. I understand the sentiment that there are Spurs fans out there saying we deserve relegation, but I don't think they really understand how catastrophic that is. There's no guarantee you come back. Yeah. None whatsoever. And then there might be just such a stink around the club, and there is already, that some managers, you hear these rumors that managers won't even consider coming to work for us anymore because it's just such a basket case.
Yeah,
no. So
we set ourselves back years.
What are we doing here? You had to get him out the door. The minute that match was over, get him out, get somebody else in. Obviously, I don't know who. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know the manager market so well that I can come up with 7 names that might be able to miraculously revive us. But by Christ, this team, this club needs CPR, and Tudor doesn't know how to do it. Out the door. Let's get somebody else in before we run out of games. We've got 9 games left. 3 wins probably sees us safe. Maybe even 2, depending on how poorly the other teams are below us. But it all adds up to the fight that's not in our team and the fight that is in Nottingham Forest, that is in Leeds, that is in West Ham, even in Wolves lately. Now they've got no pressure on them whatsoever. Get him out the door. I could not believe he's still there. I couldn't believe the club confirmed he'll be there for the Friday press conferences. I'm astonished.
That's because, Vinay and Lang don't want to have to answer more questions internally, so they're just going to stick by it.
They'll have a lot more questions to answer when we're playing in the Championship, Dave.
Well, they won't. They'll just be sacked and they'll go on and get another job. They won't care, to that point. But, I would also make the point, boys, that I think Tudor's been trying to get himself sacked. I think, he came in with motivation. I think he's looked at the situation, doesn't believe he can save us, to be brutally honest with you. Very quickly, he came out and said,
no comment.
This is the worst I've ever seen it. And he's been at smaller clubs with smaller resources and less talent. The fact that he's come in and says, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I think that's already him going, oh my God, even I can't save this. And I'm known as the sort of guy to put out fires. I'm known as the fireman. Then he's already called out the players after the second game. You can't run, can't attack, can't defend. Usually that's a manager's last resort to try and get something out of them. You also look at it, Has he changed anything on the football pitch in terms of formation, style? No. He's asked them to press a little bit harder. But apart from that, he's just run out the same formation Tommy Frank did. So he hasn't really come in and changed things and really given them that breath of fresh air. Then he's also been coming in sort of like a drill sergeant in the army, screaming, barking at them, putting them on blast publicly and stuff like that, not really protecting them. And, I just think, then players aren't having them. But, if they're not even having each other and they've all got different causes to fight, I don't even believe the next guy coming in the door now at this point would save us. I thought maybe rolling dice I think with Thomas Frank, you had to roll the dice and try something different. But, as the longer this goes on, the more these reports come out, unless your dressing room is right, you have absolutely no chance. You all have to be fighting to want to survive. And a lot of these players don't. A lot of them are already on the phone to their agents. Where I'm off to this summer, what clubs are interested. They're already looking to tap out. So I do think we have to roll the dice, but I also don't think Tudor wants to be here. I think after the first game, after Arsenal, did he not come out and question the ambition inside the club and stuff like that? It's like these are things that we've seen managers do after being in a job for 16 to 18 months and getting fed up with it. He's done it within 3 or 4 games. He's doing everything he can to get sacked. But Vinay and Johan Lang won't slack him because they're incompetent. And then all of a sudden they have questions to answer. They're like, okay, you've got it wrong twice now. Twice. But they shouldn't the decision shouldn't even be left in their hands anymore. Put them on gardening leave. Tell them they're incompetent, and start making the decisions yourself at this point. Or, I hate to say it, go and ask Daniel Levy what to do. Because you have no clue.
Oh, no.
Daniel Levy did have an interesting conversation with Harry Redknapp, which we might still have time for. Just maybe quickly, Jack, to get you in on this, like with Tudor not being sacked. I mean, do you think he needs to be sacked right now? Did he need to be sacked after the Atletico game, the Crystal Palace game? And then also, why is it, maybe in short, because it's probably a long answer, but why is it that he found a way to be such a good firefighter at other clubs and was able to rescue them? But for some reason, Spurs, he seems to find it an impossible task.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I'd give him Sunday just as a sacrificial lamb, to be honest. I think similar to the North London derby where he came in and had to deal with that as his first game. I think that was possibly a little bit unfair on him. The Liverpool game, I don't want the next manager coming in having to go to Anfield on their first game. I want them to, I don't know if you give them Atletico, I don't know, but Atletico would be a free hit. You keep that separate from the league form, and then Forest, you just go for that Forest game. And that to be your first game, you get really up for a home game against a side in and around you. Like, I'd sort of, I know it wouldn't be popular with everyone, but someone like Mason, I think is probably our best bet at this point that you could get to come in. He knows the group of players. He knows what makes them tick. Just think you need to get a couple of key players on side and just get some easy wins, I think. And the fans will get behind him as well. I think he'd know what way to talk in the media, stuff like that. I just think those sort of things that Tudor has maybe done wrong, I think Mason would just, I think he would be able to do them a bit better. But like Tudor, I just think to be honest, I just think he's an idiot, to be honest. Like, he's an appalling football manager. How he landed that Juventus job is beyond me. Like, he's tactically absolutely atrocious. Like, I thought the perfect example of him was putting Porro at centre back and Gray at right wing back. And I know Gray created the goal, but that was kind of from a set piece nearly coming out. But like, Porro's your best crosser of the ball, and you have him sitting at centre back. Like, I just don't understand how someone working in football would think that is a good idea. One of my mates said to me after the match on Tuesday, he goes, I'd back myself to do a better job than Tudor. And normally I'd be like, oh, just shut up. But I was like, I can't even push back that hard against you, because I just think he's an idiot, to be honest. Like, even the subs at halftime the other night, like, basically we had Colin, Wani and Tell come off, and you bring Gallagher and Solanke on, and then you go to counter-attack, and it's like, oh, well, who's running in behind? It's like, oh, well, we took Colin, Wani and Tell off, so Gallagher and Richarlison or Gallagher and Solanke both aren't going to really run in behind. They're not the quickest fellas in the world. And it's like, well, we've no threat running in behind, so what are we going to do now? Like, I just think his in-game decisions, his team selections are just absolutely bizarre. And to be honest, I know Paratici is someone who was quite popular within the club when he was here, but don't forget, he was a Paratici recommendation. Paratici wanted to sack Frank earlier this season and bring Tudor in, and like, I had a lot of bad things to say about Thomas Frank, but he is a level above Tudor as a manager, both in his man management and his tactics. Like, I just think Tudor's so far below the level of what we required. I think, I don't know if it was Colin or Dave said about him being a drill sergeant. I think that's about all he's got going for him. He's like Conte if you took out the charisma and the actual footballing knowledge of Conte. You're just left with an angry man shouting on the sidelines. That's basically what he is, really. And I thought it's kind of when Romero and Paulinho clashed heads, like it was a fairly serious collision. Now I know you lads are talking about like babying players, but like that was a horrible collision. It was
terrible.
And Tudor did not care to even check on the two lads. Simeone went over to Simeone. Sorry?
He doesn't want to be here. He wants to be sacked. No. You can see it in him.
But like, to be honest, like if one of my colleagues, even if I didn't like them, if something like that happened to them in the office where they smashed their head off a desk or something, I don't know what the equivalent to that would be, is I would go over and make sure they're all
paper cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're sore fingers and typing too much. I would go over and check if they're all right, just on a human level. I just think it's a decent human. I think like, players are going to be like, this fella doesn't even care about us on a human level, never mind on a footballing level, which is nowhere near as important. Kind of as just being a good person. I just don't like him at all. And kind of just to finish up on Jack saying about why he succeeded elsewhere, I think he sort of brought maybe. When he was in Serie A, he maybe brought an intensity to teams which isn't that common in the league. Whereas in the Premier League, the intensity is just a given. Like going, oh yeah, you need to run harder. It's like every team in the Premier League runs hard. Not every team in Serie A runs hard. So I just think that's ultimately all he brought to the table was, I'll get the players to run a bit harder. And like when you're playing the Premier League, running hard is non-negotiable. I know there's question marks over the players' attitude, but they look. You saw in the Champions League games how physically dominant they were over teams. I think that shows how physical the Premier League is.
Yeah.
That's just a given. And that's his kind of USP is getting them running harder and being that sort of drill sergeant. And in the Premier League, the stuff that brings is just a given. So I just think he's got nothing really. It was a total disaster, to be honest. And I think, just cut our losses as quickly as possible and try and roll the dice again.
Yeah, I mean, his successes before, though, were decently impressive in that he did take a kind of a disarray version of Juventus where they brought in Thiago Motta and he was supposed to be kind of the new revelation, the new guy to build around, and he absolutely failed. Was able to have them finish in the Champions League with all these other teams that were competing for it. It was a very competitive season for the top four last year with any of the Serie A teams, and he was able to somehow get them there. I'm not sure, especially with after what Jack has said, him being basically a glorified drill sergeant. But even with Marseille, like he had a better win percentage than De Zerbi did, and he was able to deliver them Champions League. It's just, I don't think he is a great manager, but once again, it has seemed like Spurs make potentially okay or very good managers look absolutely incompetent at times. There's such a long list of that being the case. Even Nuno, right? I mean, he's never the right guy for Spurs, but he's about to rescue Nottingham Forest last year or 2 years ago, brought them to the potential, of Champions League, ended up falling out and got just Europe. And now he's about to rescue West Ham from what looked like an unrescuable decision, whatever the word is. And I just think it's the case that so many times that a manager comes in at Spurs and they come in with all this reputation and then they're made to look absolutely useless with not much time. Thomas Frank, I mean, we all kind of felt like no one could do much worse than Thomas Frank. He had 2 wins in 17 matches, had the easiest run of games in January that you could possibly imagine to get yourself away from this relegation battle. If we had won just 2 of those very easy games in January, we would not be in the position we are now. That's all Thomas Frank had to do, and he failed at that as well. It's just so many managers have been made to look useless. Somehow Igor Tudor has been made to look even worse than Thomas Frank.
Well, Sorry, Dave. Just very quickly, and I'm not a fan of Igor Tudor. You heard what I said already, but with all due respect to him, he has no toolkit here with which to work. We've only got a tiny squad. So like he could go into other places and look good because he's probably 22, 23 men to select. We've only got 15 here.
I just think in hindsight, I think if you would have brought me in before the January transfer window, come in, let me assess the dressing room, get rid of some of the bad eggs, bring in a couple of guys, that of his sort of mentality, his ilk, I think might have given him a better chance, and he might have steered us away from it. But I think in hindsight, looking at it, when you've only got a certain window, is he the right guy? Because it's not like he comes in and talks about running harder, and but at the end of the day, you need players to be with you. And players ain't with him in that regard, and maybe it is just about fluffing them up right now when they walk in, telling Jesus, did you have a haircut last night? Your hair looks great. Did you what moisturizer did you use? Oh my God, you're glowing. Shit like that. Maybe that is what they need.
You finally noticed, Dave.
And he's looking at Colin the whole time. If we have time for it here, we'll finish off on this question, just having to do with a strange phone call that apparently Harry Redknapp had with Daniel Levy. He described it as a strange 30-minute phone call on Talk Sport. Harry said that with the phone call that he spoke to him at since he left, and he said suddenly the phone goes, and Daniel Levy, he was explaining that what had happened to him and how he sort of got marched out of the club, which was really strange. He said, look, if I was there now, I would definitely, and I'm not saying it, would have brought you back, Harry, into the season, into the end of the season with the club 1 point above relegation zone. Is a Harry rescue mission actually what we need right now, or is that maybe just nostalgia talking? Jack, I mean, do you believe that Harry Redknapp had this conversation with Daniel Levy in the first place? Is this him just kind of gassing himself up here to potentially get the job? Maybe a bit of self-PR?
I think he should change his name to Walter Biggie with the story like that. I've never heard such rubbish in my entire life. I'd say maybe Levy said it as a joke that he would have said it. Like,
doesn't strike me as a guy to even ring someone up randomly, Daniel Levy, to be perfectly honest. He doesn't seem like that sort of type of feller.
The wife's probably sick of listening to him. He said, who's the only other person I can talk to? I'll give Harry a ring there.
Potch is busy right now.
Potch is trying to watch the match against Atletico. I'll ring Harry. Okay, maybe like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, obviously we weren't in the same situation with, was it 2 points after 8 games or whatever, sacked Juande Ramos and brought not quite a prime Harry Redknapp in, but pretty close to, well, I guess it probably was prime Harry Redknapp then. And we were kind of the peak of what he got to, and he brought him in, and obviously he turned it around. I think we finished top half that season. The fella's like 78 years old. Like, Daniel Levy would never have in a million years put Harry Redknapp in charge of the club, and I don't know what he's on about. I think he's just trying to pump up his own ego a little bit. And I like Harry; he's a likable fella, but he talks some amount of rubbish at the same time. I think that's just purely self-serving. And I heard him, Levy, saying, they basically bullied me out of the club. They wouldn't let me even clear out my office or whatever. And it's like, Levy, does he expect us to feel sorry for him? Like, that is exactly what he did to Harry Kane, exactly what he did to Pochettino. Like,
Martin
he used that. He basically wrote the book on how to do stuff like that, and he's telling Harry Redknapp about how unfair it was. But like, I don't know. I have no time for Daniel Levy. I think some of the revisionism. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you think there's an ulterior motive with Daniel Levy just ringing Harry Redknapp out of the blue like that? Sort of like get it out in the press that I was harsh done by, and maybe he's trying to, take back his position.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's trying to do. It's purely self-serving. He knew Harry was the most obvious person to blab to talk sport or whatever. That was the best way to get his message out. But like, I just think the revisionism around Daniel Levy that I've seen over the last few months is absolutely ridiculous. Like, people go on like as if we'd never possibly have been this low down the league with Levy. I don't think we'd be in quite this position. I think he would have sacked Frank.
Finished 17th last year at Levy.
Yeah, like we finished 17th last year. The summer transfer window was closed when Levy left. So, like, pretend Levy was here when every single person on the playing staff and the coaching staff up until last month was signed, apart from Conor Gallagher and Sousa. So the thought that this is like Daniel Levy can wash his hands of this mess is just absolutely bizarre. But at the same time, I saw the stuff from the fan advisory board about BNI coming in and basically saying, no, this is all Daniel Levy's mess. I have no accountability whatsoever. These guys are the biggest scumbags on earth. They like to pretend that there's nothing they could possibly do to fix this situation that they are paid silly sums of money to fix.
Seems to be a common theme running through the club. No one seems to be taking accountability. They're all just blaming someone else.
Well, listen, I think I don't think there's an individual player you could blame as much as you would blame Lange, Paratici, Vinay, or Daniel Levy, or the Lewis family as a whole, and whatever that son-in-law's name, Nick Boucher, or whatever his name is, whatever he's up to, living in Miami and running Tottenham from there, remote working. But like, I don't know, like those guys are ultimately more fault than any individual players. You can blame the playing group as a whole, fair enough, they're the ones that can fix it on the pitch, but no individual player can have as much of an impact as the guy that's in charge of recruitment, in charge of hiring managers, hiring senior staff within the club. Like, these are the guys the buck stops with. They are doing an absolutely appalling job. And I think football clubs are probably the only sports franchises in general are the only things in the world where you can have incompetent people end up really high up positions. Because the reality is fans will pay regardless of where the club is. Whereas if you're a cereal brand or whatever, if your cereal tastes like shit, people will just simply stop buying it. Whereas the equivalent for a football club, that stadium's still going to be full, the TV rights still comes in. So these guys don't have to be competent. And ultimately, you see what happens with teams, not quite as big as us, but with Leeds, with Aston Villa, with teams like Blackburn. You've seen teams like Bolton go bust. Like, this is just what happens with football clubs. Man United, look how far they've fallen. I know they've made their way back a little bit, but they finished 15th last season, having won 13 titles in the Premier League. Like, these clubs are run by total idiots, and they end up in these positions because the money keeps rolling in, regardless of how bad of a job they're doing. And they can just spend these unlimited sums of money, waste them away. And I just think it's unacceptable that they're not willing to take the blame, because ultimately it is their fault.
No, I agree with all that. I mean, clubs can be a complete failing business and then somehow make record profits still from, like you say, just the unwill or just the consistent commitment that fans and just loyalty that we have, almost the addiction, really. Absolutely right. I personally, Dave, I don't really know if Harry Redknapp actually had this conversation, to be honest. I mean, the fact that even the wording of it is sort of like, yeah, Daniel, rang me up. We'd only spoke once before since I'd been sacked. And he just randomly rings me up and says, oh, yeah, just crazy the situation that we're in. By the way, I would totally have you in charge right now with the situation that we're in. I'm not even just saying that. I would have you in right now, Harry, because you're so great. Of course, I'm slightly misrepresenting those quotes, but it doesn't strike me as behavior of Daniel Levy. And Jack, you are spot on about Daniel Levy claiming to, say to Harry Redknapp that he felt harshly pushed out. I mean, he sacked Jose Mourinho before a cup final, like you say there. Like, all the examples of times he's been
that was ego
and so harsh to people. It's pretty rich coming from him.
I look, first of all, I really like Harry Redknapp. He's my old friend. I have the privilege of spending a bit of time with him and meeting him and chatting to him about Tottenham and stuff like that. And to be fair, when I asked him about, who's the bigger problem at the club, Enoch or Levy, he basically said, look, Daniel Levy is just operating off the way Enoch wants him to. Daniel Levy actually cares. He's over everything inside the football club. The other guy just lives in the Bahamas. He doesn't really care too much. He just cares about profit and not having to put too much money into the football club and making it self-sustainable and all that sort of jazz. But I do believe the phone call has happened, to be brutally honest with you. Well, I think it's self-serving on Daniel Levy's part, and I think he's just fluffed up Harry's ego by saying, I would put you in there, knowing that Harry Redknapp has no problem speaking to TalkSport and letting things slip. So, I think it's just Daniel Levy maybe putting himself back in, realised how far the Lewis family have failed, give them enough rope to hang themselves. Now's my time to come back and take control. And I think that's what we're seeing unfold there.
Could be. Anything to add, Colin, before we quickly take some of these members' questions on Harry Redknapp?
I just think Daniel Levy is almost squarely to blame. It's symptomatic of the that'll do attitude towards football and nothing but perfection for anything that involves real estate. So it's all on him, or a lot of it is on him.
Yeah. We're going to take some of these members' questions here, everybody. Thank you for all the support today, everybody. Thanks to everybody that has been listening. If you haven't done already, please, again, do smash the like button. Do hype up the video as well. We would appreciate it. Just sends us out to more Spurs fans that do need whatever therapy we can try to provide. Dan Coy saying, what do you think about the club not giving any info about season ticket price reductions for next season if we are relegated? I don't think they'll change the price as most finances their season ticket, as most finance their season ticket through the club, and the price of the loan can't be changed. So fans renewing from today will be paying a normal price regardless if we stay up or not. For some, it's over £1,000 a year. The fact that they have delayed the deadline is a way of them admitting that they are very aware of the relegation situation. Whereas before, it seems like they haven't really wanted to admit to it. They haven't really want to come out and say that, yes, we're in deep, deep trouble here. The fact that they're now delaying the deadline, I think, is a pure admittance to them being in this situation. Dan, anything that we want to add to the season ticket price changing? I mean, Jack, you do go to a lot of games.
Yeah, they have to drop it if we go down. They just won't sell the season tickets otherwise. And the reality is, if that stadium's got 20,000 people in it, it's going to be very tough to get an atmosphere going. Like this toxicity is going to carry forward. Whereas if you drop those season ticket prices and just get 40, 50, 60,000 into that stadium every week, people, like, if there's not people in the stadium, they're not buying food, they're not buying beer, they're not going to the club shop. Like, I think ticket prices is only sort of a portion of it. And I think the reality is they'd have no choice but to take the hit on it. And I think you're probably talking those £1,000 season tickets to be somewhere between 600 and 700 maybe if you go down to the Championship. I would guess. I should have realised before I said that, Colin. But I think the ticket prices will drop. I can't see people paying that. And I think the extension now is to the 7th of June. So like people can just wait until they know if we're staying up or not. Club know that they're going to drop the prices if we go down. I think that's just the reality of it. And thank God anyway. It might be, for some people, it might be really the difference between renewing next season and not renewing next season. They might actually be more inclined to renew in the Championship because they can't justify paying £1,000 to watch us in another relegation battle potentially next season versus £600 to watch us in the Championship. They might actually say that's a better value for money, perhaps, if they don't have much faith in us improving next season.
Well, the current price is valued off that we're playing in the best league in world football, and that we get to watch, some of the best teams in world football come to the Tottenham Stadium.
Yeah,
well, you're not when you go down to the Championship, so you can't pay the same, you can't charge the same price. If they do, I think it's going to backfire massively. I think that will be the straw that breaks the camel back and actually finally get thousands down at a protest.
I mean, your biggest games this season would be potential FA Cup clash with a Premier League team that you used to come up against regularly. And then what would it be like? Leicester City is like, the biggest game of the season, at home or something like that. I mean, there's just no way that you could in any way try to sell people £1,000 for games against Portsmouth and whatnot. It's just, no disrespect to any of the clubs that I mentioned, but seriously, there's just no feasible way you could do that. I think Jack is right. It would be down to around 20,000 people if they did. Dropkick your teacher saying, in an ironic way, do you feel that the European trophy was the worst thing to happen to us? It's like everyone let their guard down. I feel like Dave, Artist T, or Dropkick your teacher always finds a way to spin some of the most negative questions that I've ever possibly seen. I mean, I don't know, unless you agree with them.
It was.
Colin, you seem to agree.
I had the best day ever at the parade.
Yes,
Sounds like you didn't want it to happen, us winning the Europa League. Colin, it seemed like you want to say something. Or, sorry, Dave.
Just quickly, what I would say is I don't think so. I waited my whole lifetime for a European trophy. My dad had, got to see one, and now I got to see one. So I don't think so. I think, in a way, it probably actually steered us away from what would have been the reality as a 17th league finish. And I think they should have actually used that to build on in the summer. If they wanted to sack Ange, and I said this when we hired Frank, we've made a huge mistake here. You were after back of winning the Europa League. You got to bring in a manager that has a history of on a CV behind him that shows he can manage a big club like this, especially off the back of finishing 17th in the league. You need a manager that is competent enough to paper over the cracks like a Jose, like a Conte were, and stuff like that in terms of, what they bring to the party. And we missed the boat there. Then we left a lot of our business, to the last day of the transfer window to sort of save face and stuff. So there was no real planning around the summer, and that's where it went wrong. This whole thing that, the Europa League, is it's the worst thing to ever happen. How can you say that? I've spent many years aiming to win a trophy at the start of the season, being disappointed come the end of the season. It's the best thing that's ever happened. It's just incompetence up the top failed to actually use that to propel us forward. And they should have learned their lesson off the back of the Champions League final and sacking Pochettino, the fucking idiots.
Yeah, agree with that. Sorry, the reason why I was inspired to... No, you're absolutely fine, Dave. Absolutely. You go for it, buddy. To say was the European trophy that we won the worst thing to happen to us is not correct. Well, and the reason why I reacted was because it wasn't without negativity. Yes, it's a glorious moment. Yes, I've waited my whole lifetime. Yes, I was crying on the phone to my cousin in Sweden, who's a Spurs fan. An incredible moment. But not only did they fail to springboard off it, as you said, Dave, the cost of doing it to the squad was twofold, in my opinion. You allowed losing in the league to become a habit. And a habit is difficult to break, whether it's winning or losing.
Yeah. And
secondly, it allowed the what I hate about Irish mentality creeping in is the Asher. You guys are shit in the league. Asher, we won a cup. And it gives you a mental get out. It gives you a mental check out. So if we wind the clock back and we don't win that, which I don't want that to happen. I want that moment. I will remember it for the rest of my life. I'm not saying that. I'm just simply saying that it's not without negative outcomes, because it allowed everybody who had underachieved horrendously. This is Tottenham Hotspur. We finished 17th in the league, but we won the Europa League. The Europa... I can't even remember the name of the competition.
Europa
now.
League, you said it right.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Did I? Yeah. 10 out of 10 for me. So that's why I was reacting in that way. I never want to take back that moment, but I don't think it was done without a negative impact, and that all just goes back to the club, goes back to Levy, squad that couldn't handle it, managers coming in trying to piece it together. Not enough investment in the squad, wrong style of players with bad attitudes, It all just adds up to the glorious story that is us fighting for survival this year. So, yes, it was a glorious moment, but it wasn't without cost.
And also, to Limpy Down Under's point, saying we also had the chance then to bring in big name players because we were in the Champions League. We would not have been able to bring in a Kudus. We would not have been able to bring in Paulinho or the likes of Xavi Simons, whatever you think of them. But we would have been shopping again, in kind of the bottom market of players that didn't maybe or couldn't claim that, they deserved to be in a Champions League team. So I think inevitably it was always going to be better for us to win a trophy, be in the Champions League, have more money to work with. We spent more money, I think, in the last summer than we had in most summers, unless I'm mistaken, really, as well. So we were going after guys like Eze. We were going after guys like Morgan Gibbs-White. We would not have been able to do that had we not won the Europa League and had we not been in the Champions League for it. And also Thomas Frank, which a lot of people who love Thomas Frank fail to mention, is that Thomas Frank was also given his whole backroom staff and every single personnel and staff that he could have asked for. That had never been done before under any other manager. So when people say that Thomas Frank wasn't fully backed, probably the case in January, but in the summer he was given more than almost any other Spurs manager I can recall in a long time as well. So that was down to winning the Europa League, was that they were able to show I don't think they showed a ton of ambition, but more ambition than they had with previous managers.
I think you also look at it. I think in the case of Eze and Morgan Gibbs-White, if we had a manager over Conte, over Jose's stature, I think we would have had more of a chance of getting them. I think Gibbs-White probably would have pushed for a move if there was a manager at Tottenham he really wanted to come and play for. I would also argue it would have been even more of a difficult decision for Eze if Tottenham had a real good manager, with a real good reputation in the dugout. And I tried to highlight this at the time. Why didn't, everyone said they would have took some of the Brentford squad at the time. Why didn't any one of them want to come and play with Thomas Frank again?
No.
And I think that's where we went wrong. And I think that set the summer up for failure, because Thomas Frank isn't a guy that you've got top players clamoring to play for.
And then he also says, maybe you take this one, Jack. Do you think Van de Ven is clearly downing tools?
I wouldn't say down in tools. I definitely don't agree he's trying to get himself sent off. I think it's more frustration rather than anything else. I just think he's playing with him and Romero are both playing with that anger about them, and it's just they're really, really unhappy with the situation. But at the end of the day, I want the players to care, but like you have to be calm at the same time. I just think there's a fine balance to be had. Like you probably have them on one end of the spectrum where they're too frustrated with it, and then you have guys like Colin Moani who doesn't seem to be bothered in the slightest. If you'd probably asked me, like, well, I don't really care at all. Like, so I think it's about striking the right balance. I think someone like Archie Gray obviously is striking that balance. He's shown that he cares while also keeping a calm head. And I know it's his birthday today, only 20 years old. He plays like a veteran. He's a brilliant player. So I don't think he is trying to get himself sent off. Be playing with him, Romero playing with sort of an immaturity about them, whereby they're frustrated with this situation and they're letting it kind of seep into their performances rather than them not caring. It's the end of the day. Van de Ven, Romero's guaranteed his place in the Argentina backline. He's one of their most important players, whereas Van de Ven isn't necessarily a guaranteed starter for the Netherlands. He wants to have a good finish to the season and start at the World Cup. So I don't think that can be underestimated kind of in the player's psyche. Like maybe that's something for the next manager to look into, say to Van de Ven, you want to be in top form going into this World Cup because I know you're good enough to start for the Netherlands. Just you have to mollycoddle him. You just have to give him motivation. Like I think stuff like that, if a manager can frame it like that, I think maybe he can have a different outlook then and starting to, as Ange said, show them the players they are, not the players they can be. I think that's sort of what needs to be done. Whereas now they're kind of just like everything's just panic.
Mm.
Yeah, and then what else does from which players do you think want us to get relegated? You could list a whole lot of players that probably don't seem to care. I think there's going to be a huge
Look at
mass.
Spence. I think Spence
is going to be a huge exodus this summer,
think.
Dave. There's so many players that are going to be out
Gallagher.
there to get relegated.
Oh, fuck him. I hate him.
I think Spence, Gallagher, I think just looking at performances on the pitch, I question, does Moani really give a shit? I think he knows he's out of here in the summer, going somewhere else. You know, they're the few names I've sort of got right now. But then I also question the likes of Porro, Vicario, Van de Ven, Romero. If we go down, they all know they're going to get moved. Like I think it's wishful thinking. Oh, some of these guys are going to stay with us. Maddison, when Leicester got relegated, did he stay and bring them back up? No. He bounced as soon as a Premier League opportunity came around or a bigger league come around. And a lot of these players will do the exact same thing. So to be honest with you, and I actually think the majority of them don't give a shit, to be honest with you, RST. I think there's very few in there that care. I think some of the younger members, like your SARS or your Greys or that, I think really do care. But I think the rest don't give a shit, to be brutally honest with you. Yeah. I think, you know, when Romero had to come out and moan about the club not putting on a private jet before a North London derby to get these players back, yet they're going away on international duties and seeing, you know, top players at top clubs and the care and the welfare that they're getting compared to what they're getting at Tottenham, you know, I don't think they have any reason to fight. They don't like the fans, they don't like the managers, and they certainly don't like the board or the player care that they're offering. So what is their reason to dig in and fight for anybody here? And I think that's been reflected on the football pitch, to be brutally honest with you. And the only way of changing that culture is a big clear out in the summer. But, you know,
you can't even really offer them more money.
You can't go and isolate guys out of the squad now because we're limited on numbers. But, you know, this is where they should have brought back some of them guys that they sent out on loan to gain first-team experience, that have got first-team experience, to bring them back so that if there was this culture, and there was always going to be a risk of this culture developing when you're in a battle like that and you're a big club, you are going to get some players that are like, I don't care, I'm out here in the summer, I have no loyalties or ties or connection to this football club. And they should have seen that on the horizon and brought some of these guys back, because at least if you put them in, they're not going to take that side of things because they're still trying to make the way in the professional game. And at least you would see a bit of heart, desire. Now, whether they'll be good enough to keep us up or not is another question, but at least you'd see some fucking commitment on the football pitch.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely agree. Well, everybody, thanks for listening along. Thanks for once again trying to power through the situation with us, talk it out with us. Thanks to Colin as well as Jack for taking the time out of their evenings to chat about the basket case that is Tottenham Hotspur. Yeah. If you are listening to this back, please, everybody, smash the like button as well. We have another game this weekend, this Sunday, of course, against Liverpool. I have no expectations going into it, but I think we'll, of course, still try to get ourselves up for it. As Dave has said many a times, the players ask for us, you know, to be there behind them. We're still talking about this team, despite all they've put us through this season. We're still here. We're still here chatting about it. We're still here trying to make sense of it. They have to do their part at some point, but we'll be here for it no matter what. Thank you guys for all the support. Thanks for the members giving their questions today on the show. Hope to have a good rest of your evenings, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.